We Saved You a Seat is sponsored by the Oklahoma Family Network. Oklahoma Family Network focuses on supporting families of children and youth with special health care needs and disabilities, as well as families who have children with a mental health or behavioral health diagnosis. Oklahoma Family Network provides families with emotional support, resource navigation, parent-to-parent engagement opportunities, and wants to ensure quality health care for all children and families by building strong and effective family professional partnerships.
We're going to talk about compassion fatigue, just some ideas about how to prevent it and understand it and kind of understand where you're at. So a little bit of my background. I'm Lauren Alvarez, and I'm a human first. Sometimes we forget we have all these roles in our lives. I'm a human. I'm a wife. I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm a counselor. I'm a parent educator. And I could keep adding to this list. It seems like the list doesn't get smaller. It just seems to get bigger. There are so many different roles that we play in life. Some roles really fill us up. Some roles, not so much. And so that's what tonight is about, is really finding the balance. So compassion fatigue, I'm in a counseling field. So I get to do some amazing fun things. One of my favorite things to do as a school counselor is go in and do my monthly guidance lessons. So we've been talking about kindness this month, and we have a kindness calendar, and I'm teaching them about how kindness is good for them and for their brain, and teaching them about brain chemistry. It's so fun to know that I'm having such a positive impact. But I get to deal with the tough stuff too. I get those phone calls. I make those DHS reports. I'm helping families who are really struggling and kids who are really hurting and the families that are hurting with them. So that when we are in a field where we're not all by ourselves and we're having to help others, we need to really be mindful of, how am I doing? I cannot take care of others if I can't take care of myself. So compassion fatigue is this um, situation where you have not been able to kind of maintain your own personal balance while caring for others. And as a result, you become physically and emotionally drained. But sometimes stress is such a nonstop daily part of our lives that it almost becomes our normal, to where someone else looking in would be like, how in the world are you doing all of this? And for us, we've been doing this for so long that it actually feels normal. And we might not realize how close we might be to burnout. What really inspired me in this area is I had to go back to grad school. So I became a school counselor, and part of my certification was I needed to have graduate hours in counseling. I had a master's degree, but I needed some specific graduate counseling hours. And so I jumped back into grad school, and, I'm a total nerd, absolutely loved it. And in a lot of my classes on learning to be a therapist, and a lot of my classes, we were talking about surveys that we could do with clients or people that we were helping, self-care surveys and compassion fatigue surveys, and trauma and ACE surveys, and all sorts of different things. So part of our program involved doing the surveys too. And now I'm a very kind, compassionate helper. I thought I was doing great until I took some of the surveys, and I went, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how stressed out I was, because it had been my normal for so long that I was so used to treading water in a toxic stress environment that I didn't realize that it could be anything different. I didn't have the self-awareness to know how close I was to burnout. And if I became burned out as a counselor or a parent educator, that was definitely going to trickle down into my ability to be a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. All of these parts of our lives are not just little, doors that we open and close. It's an integrated part of who we are. So that's what I like about this compassion fatigue survey, is it actually gives you a number. It gives you a starting point. And that can be a real eye opener for us, either to validate, hey, we really are maintaining those healthy boundaries and self care and all that, so that we aren't completely drained. Or it can be an eye opener to, hey, I need to get some systems in place that are going to help me be able to do the things that I love, and the things that sometimes you don't really always have a choice as a caregiver. You could be in a more difficult time in your life. I have aging parents, and now I drive them to doctor's appointments. That's not just something I get to decide, oh, I don't want to. This is an honor for me to get to do this, but it's one more thing that can be difficult. So a lot of us are in positions where we are caring for others or are in a situation that we don't fully have control over, that the stress still impacts us. So very important for us to have an understanding of this. So tonight we're going to kind of cover compassion fatigue, kind of identify what that is, and that's what the survey is about. And then what can I do about that? We'll briefly touch on some ideas about circle of control, what's in my control, what's out of my control, as well as really setting up healthy boundaries. One thing I have found, definitely from personal experience, that people who are in the people helping business are not so great about boundaries, because sometimes it feels like boundaries will, what? I get to say no? Like, I can't say no. I mean, there's a need. You're right. There are more needs than there are times, minutes in a day. You can't meet all the needs. And then we feel like we're not caring if we don't, and we really lose track of what's a healthy boundary. No can be a really important part of our vocabulary, especially if we want to be able to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. Okay. So what is compassion fatigue? It's just a condition that occurs when caregivers are totally overwhelmed by stresses stemming from either the clinical, like you might be in, the medical field or an LPC, or, working with people facing chronic illness. So a clinical or interpersonal components of the role. So this might be a family member, or me as a parent taking care of children, or things like that. So either clinical, professional, or interpersonal components. We are overwhelmed by the stresses from this. Compassion fatigue is often referred to as the cost of caring for others and their emotional pain, resulting from our desire to help relieve others' suffering. And sometimes there's a cost to that. Caregivers often experience what's called secondary trauma, which is referred to as the cost of caring. So someone else might have trauma, and while I'm helping them with their trauma, I kind of get that secondary exposure to it. This can be really difficult. I know for me, some of the stories I've heard children share, some of the DHS reports I've, had to make as a mandated reporter as an adult, some of the clients that I've met with as an LPC. Those are things that you have to be very careful to not take all that with you. But there's some secondary trauma you can't avoid when you hear the stories. Your work is meaningful and necessary, but if we're not careful, it can lead to emotional exhaustion. And that's what's referred to, you might have heard it as burnout, but another term would be compassion fatigue. And then here's the tricky part. Then we feel overwhelmed with guilt because we don't want to help. But man, if I was a good person, I would want to help, and I should want to help, and I should have a good attitude about that. That word should is full of shame. The guilt of not wanting to help when we reach that point that we're burned out, it's almost like, well, I'm saying no, but now I feel terrible that I said no. It can be a vicious cycle. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water and not get wet. That's a wonderful quote. Of course, it's by Dr. Naomi I'm not quite sure how to say her last name, Dr. Naomi Raymond. That we will experience suffering when we are helping those who are suffering. We will experience stress when we are helping those who are stressful. There's no way that we can have Teflon that completely coats us, because if we are that clinical and that emotionally removed, we're not going to be effective. But even with that being said, that we are going to be impacted by these things, you can still form amazing, healthy boundaries, have some really good systems in place that allow you to continue to care for others while still being safe and protecting yourself. So, but sometimes we don't know how to do that. We certainly aren't taught how to do that. Another thing that I think is really important for us to have an understanding of is our nervous system and how it's wired. So many different fields overlap and really help. So, in understanding our brain, understanding stress, understanding what stress looks like on a nervous system level, understanding mindfulness, all these different bits and pieces that we hear about. I think it's important for us to understand our actual nervous system, the part of our body that is designed to handle the stress, whether it is physical stress or emotional stress. So there's two main components, and of course it's much more detailed than this, but there's two main responses of the nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, that's our reactive part of our nervous system. That's the stress response. So when we perceive a threat or we're under stress or we have a really big workload or something like that, that activates our sympathetic nervous system, kind of that fight or flight part of our nervous system. While this part of our nervous system is activated, the heart beats fast, breathing is fast and shallow, pupils are expanded, the gut becomes inactive because all the blood flow goes to organs and muscles that are needed, kind of more for this crisis. Blood rushes to your skeletal muscles and away from your brain. So sometimes we don't think so clearly in this fight or flight mode. Hormones rush through your body, making you feel anxious. You might have adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your body. And it takes a lot of energy to keep that sympathetic nervous system going. If we're not careful, we can stay stuck in our sympathetic nervous system. Now, if our heart is beating faster as a natural part of the sympathetic nervous system, is that sustainable if we're that way all the time? If our gut becomes inactive because blood flow is going to this more fight or flight response, is that sustainable? Are we able to, sustain the kind of physical, not just emotional, but physical responses that our body's just going through to try to help us get through this stressful event? Adrenaline gives us energy, but it also comes at a cost. So then there's also the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the part of our nervous system that's associated with calming down, being restful, being restored. When we are in this state, our heart is being slower in a more rhythmic pattern. Breathing is full and slow. The pupils of the eyes shrink. The gut is working and helping you digest and move along your food. You get more blood flow to your gut and lungs and brain. So your brain's working better, your breathing's working better. Hormones rush in, the good kind of hormones like oxytocin and serotonin and endorphins that lift your mood and help you actually feel relaxed. And you're in a state where your body's able to conserve energy and rest and repair. Now, when we are in the people helping business or when we are a caregiver, there's some things just inevitably we're going to activate our sympathetic nervous system a lot. However, without realizing it, if we don't have good systems in place that are purposefully activating our parasympathetic nervous system, things like mindfulness. Some people think, oh, those silly little hokey deep breaths, and I'm going to do box breathing and, do my mindful meditations, oh, whatever. That's activating your parasympathetic nervous system. That's actually helping kind of keep things balanced. I always tell the story, and I think it's just fascinating to me how much we underestimate the power of things like mindfulness and doing things on purpose to activate our parasympathetic nervous system. I was a single mom for almost 5 years. And during that time, my three sons who are now grown, we got a flyer in the mail from the Laureate Institute for Brain Research. And it was talking about you can earn money being part of our studies. And we're like, we need money. Let's go for it. And you got $25 an hour for filling out paperwork and $50 an hour for being in the MRI machine as part of these different studies they were doing. So the boys wanted to do it. And while I was there as their, adult person, monitoring my minor children, they're like, oh, you qualify for some studies. I'm like, sure. So they signed me up for a depression study. So it was someone who was experiencing symptoms of depression but was not medicated. That was definitely me. So in the study, we were supposed to list our happiest memories, like intensely happy memories. And a lot of my intensely happy memories were from when the boys were really little. It had been a really stressful decade for me. And so a lot of those memories, I had to go back years to find some of those happy memories. And they said, all right, I want you to focus on those memories. What were you thinking? What were you smelling? What were you feeling? Really focus on those memories, visualize those things. After we talked about that, then when you were in the MRI machine, they said, okay, we want you to watch this red bar that's going up and down. So you were in the machine, there was like a screen in front of your eyes, and the red bar that was going up and down was actually measuring in real time the blood flow to the part of your brain associated with calming down. And we were trying to increase blood flow to that part of the brain. How do you do that? You do that by concentrating on happy things, doing mindfulness exercises. So for this, I was just concentrating on my intensely happy memories. Like the first time my son learned to crawl and he was so cute. The first time my other son learned to walk and was walking around the house like Frankenstein. These amazing happy memories that still make me smile. And I could see that bar going up as the blood flow increased to that part of the brain as I was using that part of the brain. The weird and crazy result of this study is almost 100% of participants in this study wound up having significant, clinically significant increase in happy moods and decreases in depression. Not a single medication was taken, not even any kind of mindfulness strategies or changing schedules. The only thing that we had done is take this set time to focus on happy memories. We were increasing blood flow to our brain. I left that study, I entered it depressed, and I left not depressed. Nothing in my life had changed. What had changed was I was actually using the part of my nervous system that was associated with calming down just by doing these simple exercises like focusing on a happy memory. It's a kind of thing where you can train your brain to calm down. So when we talk about strategies for helping you with compassion fatigue tonight, I'm not just talking about, oh, go eat a perfectly healthy meal and get your 10 hours of sleep and all that kind of stuff. These are simple, concrete things that you can do that force you to utilize your parasympathetic nervous system. That's already there waiting to be used. We are very familiar with our sympathetic nervous system. As a matter of fact, our brain is constantly scanning for the next threat. Its job is to keep us alive. We have to purposefully do our parasympathetic nervous system things. So it's not just a little checklist of, how to stay happy. It's a little checklist of how to make sure you're using all of your nervous system so you can sustain really amazing, difficult things and endure really amazing, difficult, stressful moments and still stay fresh and calm. I've learned these strategies, and for the most part, every day's not perfect, but I do really tough stuff, and I'm not emotionally impacted by it, but I'm also not shut off. I'm very emotionally available, but I've learned these strategies and know what's in my control, what's out of my control. I'm going to spend my nervous system energy where it's going to be the most helpful. All right. Now, what compassion fatigue sometimes looks like, you might have these kind of symptoms. So if you recognize these in yourself, maybe you have sadness and grief. You avoid or dread working with some clients or family members. You have a reduced ability to even feel empathy towards patients or families or others. You have somatic complaints, which is physical, aches and pains and ailments and sleepiness and, neck aches and stuff. Addictions, we like to numb ourselves sometimes. Nightmares, frequent use of sick days. We're just kind of checking out. We have changes in our beliefs, expectations, and assumptions because we're just so overwhelmed. We might feel detached or have a decrease in intimacy. We might have racing thoughts that it's hard to turn off or a feeling of numbness. We might start to develop some health concerns. Maybe we have high blood pressure. Maybe we have insomnia. Maybe we're having, sporadic palpitations in our heart. We really could be feeling this physically or developing some mental health concerns. We might have decreased creativity, loneliness, or just this feeling of guilt because we don't care, but we do care, but then we don't care. It can be a lot. So these are normal things that will happen if we are always in our sympathetic fight or flight part of our nervous system. And that is often activated, inevitably so, when we're helping someone who's going through tough stuff. When we're dealing with young children who are having a hard time sleeping and they're throwing a tantrum and we're in the room and we're supposed to be the adult that helps them calm down. This is the cost of caring. But we don't have to get to the point of compassion fatigue, but you need to be aware of what it looks like. So this survey actually kind of helps measure some specific things that are associated with compassion fatigue. So first off, it actually measures this idea of compassion satisfaction. That's the pleasure you derive from being able to do your work well. So if you're scoring high in compassion satisfaction, then you're probably scoring low in compassion fatigue. Like you really get a lot of satisfaction out of your job. It also has a burnout scale. So this is kind of measuring what kind of feelings of hopelessness or difficulties you have dealing with work or in doing your job effectively. That's another scale in there. And then it measures your secondary traumatic stress. which is associated with as you're working with people going through stressful things, how much are you being impacted by that secondary traumatic stress? So if your compassion satisfaction is high, a lot of us can actually have high compassion satisfaction on this part of our scores, but still also have high burnout readings and high secondary traumatic stress. So we love what we're doing and we feel like we are making a difference, but the burnout and the secondary traumatic stress are making it a little more dangerous. We might have high compassion satisfaction and low burnout and low secondary traumatic stress. Or we might be kind of in the middle. What your score does is it just kind of helps you see where you're at. As much as I'm not a math person, I appreciate actually having a value. I know me personally, as I continue to monitor myself, and now that this is a practice of mine, I was a part-time therapist on the side. So I left doing that, which I was making a difference. I did parenting and anger management, but I knew that I couldn't do that and also have the time that I needed for my daughter, who's only home for 4.5 more years. I can pick that back up at another time. So, these healthy boundaries are really, really important. So I think it's important though for you to look at those scores and really think, okay, what works for me? First off, when I first took a survey like this at the beginning of grad school, I scored so low and I was upset and I like felt like I was a failure. And I'm like, what? This is just telling me where I'm at. This is helping me be more self-aware. And if I want to actually be able to help clients like I'm studying to do, I need to make sure I know how to take care of myself. So actually grad school was a huge journey for me in awareness and learning skills that I needed. The score is simply supposed to give you a good bird's eye view of, all right, where am I at? Now, that can help motivate you because even if I was scoring high in compassion satisfaction and lower in burnout and lower in secondary trauma, in order for me to stay that way, I need to maintain. And there's always areas we can improve in. So, what do we do? And I know we've heard these a million times, but I want you to see it through a different lens. I want you to see it through how can I take care of my parasympathetic nervous system, the part of my body associated with calming down? How can I do that better? This is for you. You do tough stuff. You are making a difference. How can I keep making a difference? So things like eating well-balanced meals, what a difference that makes. I never realized how much your blood sugar has an impact on you until I developed type 2 diabetes. And it's like, I thought I was stressed out. No, my blood sugars were in the hundreds, and even now, if I'm going to eat a cookie, I'm like, is it worth it? Because I will pay for it. Like, I don't feel good afterwards. So even though it feels really great for that minute that I'm chewing it up, is it worth it? No, I don't want to be tired later. Eating those well-balanced meals, getting enough sleep is huge. Your brain is a supercomputer. Your brain needs minutes to turn off. And if I'm not getting enough sleep, my brain still doesn't get to turn off and like stop doing its job. So it still has to take all this information that's coming in from the outside and from inside my body and make some good sense of it. And it can't do its job very well if we're not getting enough sleep. If you struggle with falling asleep, there's some really good things like progressive muscle relaxations. There's actually a Headspace channel on On Netflix. They have some helping your body fall asleep episodes literally that you can listen to. So many great things out there. Exercising because that releases a lot of the adrenaline and cortisol that our bodies will build up and store when we're using in stress mode. Practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing and things like that. And avoiding alcohol and non-prescription drugs because they can backfire. And then it might be our attempt at coping, but it can backfire on us. Getting a massage, talking to a therapist, psychiatrist, family doctor, or other professional. When you are talking and you are having a supportive conversation with someone else, your brain is releasing oxytocin. You're feeling loved and cared for. Sometimes when we go to a family member or we go to our partner and we're wanting to be able to tell them deep stuff and for them to be able to help us, they might not be equipped with that. Some of the people in our life love us dearly, but they struggle with empathy, or maybe they just want to tell you how to fix it and then you get irritated. They can't necessarily aren't equipped to handle some of those burdens. So accessing a therapist and stuff does not mean you're a failure. It just means, hey, I'm going to someone who can really help me with my perspective. And what we're going to focus on right now is circle of control strategies and healthy boundaries. This is stuff that I can talk to you about. I can't do these other things for you. But a lot of us don't know about circle of control strategies. Circle of control helps you find that healthy separation about what you can control and what you can't control. So let's kind of shift gears. So you've got your score. Now, what can I do with this? So I'm really big on starting small. So I remember, January's coming up. A lot of us do our New Year's resolutions, and I'm not going to, I'm going to eat perfectly healthy and, be a vegetarian. Well, then we make it without meat for 2 days and then we can't do it. When we do this all or nothing approach, that's not sustainable. I love the 80-20 plan. 80% of the time, I'm going to eat well. 20% of the time, I'm going to eat for fun. Start with these small increments. I heard a really good quote in the Oprah magazine years and years ago. I still remember reading it that for every year you've been doing something, it might take a month for you to be able to make a change in that area. So if you have not been exercising for 10 years, it might take 10 months before you really are working into where some sort of exercise becomes your new normal. We have to give ourselves time. It's not an all or nothing approach. Instead of I'm going to practice relaxation techniques and deep breathing, great. What if we do one deep breathing thing a day, right when I wake up in the morning? What if it can be small, simple things that then you start to gain some traction. All right. Now let's kind of shift gears and start to talk about circle of control. What in the world is circle of control? So, circle of control, there are things in our lives that impact us. All right. So, with circle of control, there are things that cause us stress and don't cause us stress. So, I want you to kind of think, you don't have you've got a piece of paper, jot down some of like your top 5 stressors that you would say that you really spend a lot of time worrying about or thinking about or stressing about. What are your top 10s? All right. Top 5, top 10 things. So, think about what those are. Okay. Now, I'm going to reset your lens. So, in one thing I always like, I'm glad that we're doing this in December. So, the circle of control is a circle. A lot of people, what I've trained myself to do is when I look at a wreath, a lot of people use a wreath for decorating in the different seasons, but especially around the holidays. You see a lot of evergreen wreaths and Christmas wreaths if you celebrate Christmas. It's just a very common thing. I have my wreath earrings on today. We see circles all the time as a part of decorating. I would like for you, when you see a wreath, to be thinking, am I staying in my circle? All right, what does that mean? Let me explain. Okay. So you automatically have things in your life that stress you out. Some are in your control, some are out of your control. You might have a job that is extremely stressful, but you can't just not do that job. Or you might have a child that has a chronic health condition that can be really difficult. So you got to know what's in your control. So first off, we have our circle of concern. This is this outside gray area. This is the part of our lives that we don't have any control over, but it definitely has an impact on us. This circle of influence, which is this blue middle zone, this includes all those circumstances that we might have some influence on, like I could make things a little better in this area, but ultimately I can't control it. And then we actually have what's in our control. What are those kinds of things? So, for example, this outside area circle of concern, these are things like my past choices and decisions. Can't go back and change what's happened. The weather. We live in Oklahoma. We definitely have no control. What's going on in the world as far as world peace goes? Government policies. I can't control some of those things. If there's a death in the family, where I was born, I can't control that. The traffic, the economy and prices, strangers' behavior or their driving habits. If there's a cyber threat, other people's comments on social media, celebrities' behaviors or opinions, the media. I can't control what's predominantly talked about on the media. We're not quite finished with the political cycle, but we just went through presidential elections. There was a lot of really intense media from both sides that was very polarizing and very stressful. The outcome of a sports match or a court case. I can't control these things. Now, do these things, especially my past decisions, choices, and behavior, does it still impact me? Absolutely. I can't control it. So if I spend all my time fussing about why did I do that? I can't believe I did that. That was so foolish. I literally can't change it. So if I'm spending all my time feeling bad about something I can't change, really, almost throwing away a lot of my available emotional energy. Now, here's stuff that's in that circle of influence. So these are things that I can't completely control, but I can influence. For example, other people's actions. I can't control other people's actions, but if I do things like set a healthy boundary, I can minimize their impact on me. You know, sometimes we set a healthy boundary about what we're going to talk about at the Thanksgiving table. Are we going to talk about politics or not? We can set a boundary, and that can minimize some of the negative impact on us. Other people's choices. I can't control them, but I might have some influence. Think of you as a parent. I could not control my teenagers' choices. My young sons are grown. I can't control their choices, and I can't control my 14-year-old daughter's choices. But the quality of my relationship with them, definitely I can increase my influence. But I can't control them. But I can, if I have a great relationship with them, they might listen to some of the things I have to say. My productivity at work. I'm a school counselor. My work can be interrupted anytime, any moment, and I never know. However, if I do things like keep a list, have things prepared, it does increase my productivity. Whether or not people like me, can't control it, but how I treat other people could influence whether or not they like me. My children's future. This is a tough one. We will stress and worry and freak out and fuss about what's going to happen. I have no control over that. I can have influence on my relationship with them, but that's all I can do. Where I work, sometimes I don't get to decide, but I can definitely, sometimes changing, like even Michaela, you changed a job because it wasn't working for you. I stopped doing a job because I couldn't maintain balance with that job and my full-time school counselor job. How much my partner loves me. Can't control it, but definitely I can work on communication and understanding and those things. Whether or not I get promoted, again, I can't control that, but my work productivity and the kind of stuff that I do at work might increase the chances. My reputation, again, can't control it, but I can choose to engage in behaviors that wouldn't make people maybe come up with a different kind of reputation. Who follows me on social media, my commitments. Again, some things I have are obligations. I can't just decide I'm not feeding my family. We have to eat. But, I can say no to things that aren't important. And other people's thoughts. These are all things that I can't control versus what can I actually control? My thoughts, my words, my actions and behavior and reactions, my decisions and choices, my attitude and mindset, my mood, my work ethic. That's what's actually in my control. So here's where I want you to take a second. All right, so thinking about the things that you stress about all the time, your top five, your top 10, where does that actually fit in this? Are you stressing about things and thinking about them a lot or talking about them a lot, venting about them a lot, things that are actually in this gray area, this part that I have zero control over? Are you kind of stuck where I'm in this circle of influence where I'm like, well, it's not in my control, but you actually do have some influence. My kid's behavior is not in my control. Correct. Your kid's behavior is not in your control. But maybe if we worked some more structures into our day, maybe if we started bedtime 30 minutes earlier, I could maybe have some influence on that. Classroom teacher can't be like, oh, these kids are crazy. Yes, you can't control the kids that are in your classroom, but if you don't have any classroom management structures or clearly defined expectations and procedures, then it's going to be a lot worse than if you actually have some clearly defined expectations and procedures. So we can't just throw up our hands and say, like, it's out of my control. Is it still in your influence, though? Are there little things that you could adjust that might improve this for your benefit? Or is it actually in your control? You can answer that question. I can't answer that for you. Can we be honest with ourselves? It's super easy to vent about all this stuff that's out of our control. But if I am constantly talking about things that aren't even in my control, my brain, the way my brain is wired, is for everything I'm complaining about or fussing about or talking about or focusing on, my brain, my sympathetic nervous system reacts in a way that as if it's actually happening and I have control over it. So it stays in this fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight over something I literally can't control. So I am keeping my brain in a reactive state over something that I could stay in a reactive state 24 hours a day and it's not going to make any difference in this area. I'm literally giving myself away for something that has no return. Now, where should I invest my time? In the things I have influence on, increase my influence, learn skills, learn strategies, whatever it is, and on what's actually in my control. My thoughts, my feelings, my behavior, when I choose to go to sleep, how often I choose to pick up my phone. All these things, those are in my control. And what you'll find is if we are focusing on things that are out of our control, all right, then we feel helpless and hopeless and overwhelmed. And sometimes it feels like it's out of our control when really if we take a look at it, is there anything that I can actually have influence on? So when you can't control it, I choose to not focus on that. I choose to not write about it. A lot of things, especially when it comes to really, really polarizing politics, if I'm kind of already in a stressful mood and I can't listen to learn, I turn it off. It's not helping me and it's something I can't control. So I'm not going to get myself upset by listening to things that upset me. I'm not being ignorant. I'm just choosing how am I going to focus my time? When we can't change our circumstances, don't invest your energy in that. We have the capacity to make adjustments in our schedule. Make adjustments where they count, whether that's your behavior, your thinking, little areas for self-care. That's what actually matters that you have control or influence over. Really changing our attitudes about problems we have no control over. Michaela, you mentioned co-parenting. So many times, we want to focus and stress and stress and stress about what the other parent's doing and da 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 da, when really, I can't change what they're doing. I can improve the quality of my communication. I can choose what to let go of. I was a co-parent and still am a co-parent, although the boys are grown, but we had that single parenting, co-parenting, blended family, co-parenting, all the things. And it's hard. But, when I actually shifted my attitude, I'm like, I'm not going to worry about what's going on over there because I can't change it. I'm going to work on my relationship with my kids. I'm going to work on my home environment and making it the most peaceful and calm and restorative as possible. I'm going to work on my bedtime routine so my kids are getting enough sleep. I'm going to work on quality of my relationship with them so that when they need me, I'm emotionally available. I'm going to work on my time management so that I'm not wasting time in these areas so I have time and energy left over for them. When I made that shift, it was like none of my life changed, but all my energy level changed. These things, what's in my control, what's not in my control. Sometimes seeing a therapist helps you realize, like, changes our perspective about what's in our control and what's not in our control. Make those adjustments. Expectations. Try to have realistic expectations. Be picky about your schedule and your logistics. Plan for how things are going to work for your needs. It's okay to say no. Support, connect to your village. Surround yourself with people who are actually building you up and support you. Mindfulness. Take the time to do these mindfulness exercises. Me sitting in that MRI machine as a part of that Laureate for Institute for Brain Research study was actually building new neural pathways in my brain. When you do mindfulness activities and you find your favorites, and there'll be some that get emailed to you, you are literally building access to the parts of your brain associated with calming down. Doing those little things makes a huge difference. Here's a simple example. I have a friend who was really stressed out at work, worked with drug and alcohol clients, and, moved into a director position, was overwhelmed, with all the new responsibilities and all the pressures and having to hear everyone's stories. That was really stressful. And so he would always tell his clients, take a minute to ground yourself, which is focusing on one thing you can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. He told them to do that. He wasn't doing it. So he's like, all right, I need a new system that's going to help me do this. He'd set his watch to beep every hour on the hour, right? Then when his watch would beep every hour on the hour during work days, morning routine, work day, hour after work day. When that beeped, that was his quick reminder, 30 seconds. I'm just going to quickly, something I can see, smell, hear, taste, touch. It literally got his brain right here, right now. Someone mentioned this at a retreat that sometimes if where you are right here and now is a stressful place, like the hospital, focus on a memory. From my memory, my happy memory, what do I see, hear, smell, taste, touch? That resets my brain. Actually forces you into your parasympathetic nervous system. It calms you down. Simple little things, mindfulness, things like that. You're literally building a super highway in your brain for calming down. You can manage all sorts of stress if you do this. And joy. Choose the things that bring you joy without guilt. It is okay to take care of yourself. All right. Now, because of time, you'll get the whole presentation emailed to you. So remember, it only takes a minute. Find your favorites, share those with others. It only takes a minute. Brain's a pattern seeking device. It wants to do things that it knows how to do. If your brain knows how to freak out, it's really good at freaking out. If your brain learns how to calm down through mindfulness activities and you choosing, I'm not going to focus on that, really makes a huge difference. You can't just wait till the crisis, you're in crisis mode to then apply these strategies. You need to practice these when you are not in crisis mode so your brain can quickly move to them. It takes some time to build these pathways. Oh my gosh, it's so worth it. So I will send a lot of ideas in that email. And just different, find your favorite websites, Headspace and Balance is another good website. My brain is freezing right now, but I have some links to some of my favorite calm down activities. I love the Mindful Self-Compassion website, it has tons of fantastic little exercises that you can do and find your favorites and work them into your routine. All right. Simple things like box breathing. Let's do this together really fast, all right? So box breathing is a specific structured breathing method. The Navy SEALs use this to help them calm down. I have one of the track coaches at Jenks where I work. She uses this with her athletes when they're waiting to go for their event to start and they're kind of in that nervous freak out mode. She has them do box breathing. So it basically, I have kids trace it on their hands. So you're basically breathing in the shape of a box. So I'm going to breathe in for 4. I'm going to hold it for 4. I'm going to breathe out for 4. I'm going to hold it for 4. I'm going to breathe in, hold it, breathe out, hold it. If you're in freak out mode and you feel that stress starting to roll on you, just stop and do a box breath. I was at Brahms about 3 months ago, sitting there eating dinner with my daughter. One of the people that was there working whipped off her headset, said a couple of foul words, and stormed off and ran into the bathroom. She was really, really emotionally like up here. Me, I'm the counselor. I'm like, I need to help. So she didn't come out of the bathroom for a few minutes. So I'm like, I'm going to see if I can be of service. So I told my daughter, I'm like, just wait here. I'll be back in just a minute. I just need to make sure she's okay. So I went into the bathroom. She had locked herself in the handicap stall and she was on the phone with someone and really, really shouting. And so I just knocked on the door and I said, hey, I'm a counselor. I'm here if you need me. Can I do some breathing with you? She's like, okay. So she opened the door and I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on. Let me help you. Let me help you. Let's do some box breaths together. So just together. I'm like, coached her through the method. I'm like, all right, let's do this together. We're going to breathe in. We're going to hold it. We're going to breathe out. We're going to hold it. And we went through like 6 box breaths. Started to calm down. Started to calm down. Started to calm down. I couldn't solve her problem, nor was that my job to solve her problem. But I could be there to offer some support. She's like, I never heard of that one before. And then she just quickly she's like, I've just been working so much and I'm not getting any sleep and I'm just overwhelmed. Just taking a breath made a difference. Took her another 10 minutes to be able to leave the bathroom and go back to work, but she's like, I can't go home. I'll get fired. I have to finish my shift. And I said, okay. And I didn't stay with her for the whole 10 minutes. But little simple things like that can reset you, especially when you're in freak out mode. Self-care is not optional. Best way to take care of people is to take care of yourself. So you literally can't help other people if you're not regulated, which lead to some boundaries. People who work with other people have a really, really hard time with boundaries. Now, sometimes it's to the point where we might be what's called codependent. We are so busy enabling everyone else to keep doing all the things they're doing that are harmful and hurtful. And we feel bad if we say no because that's not caring. So if you are a recovering codependent like me, I actually took a 12 steps for codependence. If you literally look it up, 12 steps for codependence, I was in a small group with some people I knew. And the leader really helped me. We even worked through the workbook, 12 steps for codependence, because so many of the things that I thought were like, I'm a really sacrificial helper. Nope. I was an unhealthy helper, sacrificing myself along the way. So, 12 steps for codependence. They have some great online support groups, fantastic information if you struggle with boundaries. There's another really good book called Boundaries by Townsend and Cloud. Excellent. It's like the guru book of boundaries because a lot of times if we grew up around people who didn't set boundaries, we never learned how. Boundary is simply a statement of what's okay and what's not okay. This is okay with me. This is not okay with me. It's impossible for you to set a boundary for yourself and at the same time take care of other people's feelings about that boundary. What's in your control? Setting the boundary, saying this is okay, this is not okay. What is not in your control? How other people feel about it. I am not responsible for their feelings about it. And to be honest, if we're having to set boundaries with people, they're probably not going to like it. So you are not responsible or able to set a boundary and at the same time take responsibility for other people's feelings about it. Now, it's normal to feel bad or guilty a little bit if other people are upset about it. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It just means you're not a jerk. If you didn't care, you're like, too bad, so sad. The fact that I care that someone else is upset about it and I'm a little emotionally impacted by that, that's just proof you're not a jerk. You're not heartless. Yeah, I don't want someone to be upset about it, but guess what? Just because you're upset doesn't mean the boundary shouldn't be there. I set the boundary for me and saying what's okay, what's not okay. And I don't have to feel guilty if you have a problem with that. Because whose problem actually is it? It's their problem. It's not your problem. Don't pick it up and make it your problem. And boy, does that take practice. Pushback is totally normal on boundaries with kids, with family members, with others. Boundaries are contextual. So really, you might need a boundary for this person, but you might not need it for another person. It really depends. It's not a one and done. There's no one size fits all. You have to pick one that works for you. And think about this. What's your job today? What's in front of you today? That's where we can narrow our focus. I can't do all the things. So I'm going to pick up what works for me today, what's in front of me today, and that helps you clarify what I need to say no to. No is a beautiful, positive, amazing, loving word if it keeps you on the right track. When I say no to things that allow me to take care of myself, I have more love for my family. I have more love for the people I'm taking care of. I have more love for me. No can be love. All right. Self care requires boundaries because people will take and take and take and take and take. It's okay for me to say, this is how much I'm willing to give. I'm not willing to give. I mean, when I was an LPC candidate, I would say, I'd have clients that would text at 10:30 at night. I wouldn't answer the text. I'm not responsible for your crisis. I knew that if they were in a crisis, and it looked like they could call COPES. I'd already given them those things because I had some clients that really pushed those boundaries. I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer your text at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm allowed to set that boundary. I had a parent recently text me on the weekend from my school. And she had texted me like 3 times on the weekend. I said, I will be able to respond to that in email on Monday. It's the weekend and this is my personal cell phone. You know, was that rude? Nope, that was setting a boundary. She wasn't trying to be rude either, but I needed to let her know what was okay and what was not okay. And that's all right. That's okay. That's a boundary. So here's a good example. All right. I have 10 minutes to meet and then I have another commitment. Set those time periods. I can work up to 10 o'clock, but not after that. I'm not okay at talking about so and so unless they're here in the conversation, when someone's trying to gossip or whatnot. I won't answer my phone after 9 o'clock, but I will respond in the morning. I'm on vacation and I will not be accessing my email. My son is so good at this. He actually had his boss text him when he was on vacation about something about one of his units. And he's like, I'm on vacation. I will not be responding and I will not be bringing my work phone with me. It was great. I won't participate in the discussion this way. I'm not willing to do this, but I am willing to do this. That's what a boundary sounds like. Now, if you have for 15 years of your life not set boundaries, it might take 15 months for this to feel normal, and that's okay. So I'm going to give you one more example before we go. I was in a training. Dr. B. Keller Dupree is just amazing. She's a professor at NSU in their School of Counseling, and she always comes and does professional development for us as our school counselor meetings. And she talks about things that are in her control and not in control. So she gave an example of her son. She was in a book club and she was getting ready to go to book club, and her son started crying, and he's like, "No, I want you to stay home. It's mommy and Bodhi time and daddy time, and I want us to be together." So she had a goal. I want to go to book club because it helps me connect with other people. It stretches my brain. It's taking time away from home responsibilities. This is good for me. What was out of her control? Her son's emotional reaction to that. She couldn't control that he was upset about it, but she knew why she was doing this. So she gets to control how she takes care of herself. She doesn't get to control if other people are upset about what that looks like. She could impact the situation by slowing down, listening to his sadness, and saying things like, "Hey, the next time, tomorrow, here's what we get to do together. Tonight, I'm going to go to my book club, but tomorrow we could do some special mommy, Brody, daddy time. And this is what that might look like." She could get on his eye level. She could tell him those things. That allows her to impact the situation, but she still is not responsible for his feelings. So remember, what's in your control and why are you doing it? What's out of your control? Don't pick that up. What can you actually impact? Meeting your needs, validating others, but I don't have to, I'm not responsible for all of your feelings. And this, you get better at it with practice. So if you want to avoid compassion fatigue, you have to have healthy boundaries. And if that's an area you need to grow in, read up on it, have a good friend who's good with boundaries and have them kind of be your mentor. Talk to a therapist if that really helps you, because a lot of times we're so used to not setting boundaries that when we do, it almost feels like we're being mean. We're not. And also focus on what's in your control. What's in your control, what's out of your control, and spend your emotional energy on those things. I also like to retake that survey every now and then, that compassion fatigue survey, just to kind of see where I'm at. And as you are walking through the month of December and this holiday season, when you see a wreath anywhere around, on doors, on buildings, whatever, I want you to think, how am I doing? Am I staying in my circle? So that can be kind of like a visual recheck. And it's those little tiny decisions that you make are going to make a huge difference and help you feel sustained. There are some great upcoming Oklahoma Family Network events. And remember, they also have a YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and you do the Oklahoma Family Network, they have all sorts of video recordings of past guest speakers, some of the classes that I've done for them, tons and tons of great resources, and some great events that they are doing.
Thank you for listening to this episode of We Saved You a Seat. Oklahoma Family Network promotes family-centered care and provides tools so families can make informed decisions, advocate for improved services, build connections among families, and serve as a trusted resource in health care of children and young adults. If you would like to become a supporting family or get in touch with another family, please contact Oklahoma Family Network at oklahomafamilynetwork.org or by calling 405-271-5072.